This morning I read Letter to America, which is Osama bin Laden's letter to America explaining why he attacked Americans. And I am ashamed to say that I not only have never read this letter, but I didn't even know this letter existed. It's wild, and everyone should read it. If you haven't read it yet, read it. However, be forewarned that this has left me very disillusioned, and I feel the same exact way I felt when I was deconstructing Christianity. I feel a little bit just confused, like I have entered into another timeline. What is this? And yeah, so go read it.
Every once in a while, I open Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, and then I ask myself, what the fuck has this world come to? I know sometimes we hyper focus on social media, and maybe that's not really real life, and we need to disconnect and touch grass. But unfortunately, slowly but surely, what happens on social media is bleeding out into real life. What am I talking about, you may ask? What dumpster fire have I crawled into this time? Gen Zers of the world, young people, are literally fangirling over Osama bin Laden. Okay, maybe I'm not being fair. It's not only Gen Z, but it's mostly young people and it's mostly women. You know, that is that weird psychology that women have. They tend to sort of like fangirl over like serial killers. Like maybe that's their internalized misogyny. Like they really do want to be oppressed by a man or something like that.
So I just read A Letter to America, and I will never look at life the same. I will never look at this country the same. Please read it. And if you have read it, let me know if you are also going through an existential crisis in this very moment. Because in the last 20 minutes, my entire viewpoint on the entire life I have believed and I have lived has changed. Please read that entire letter.
Anywho, I'm a millennial. I'm in a little bit of the older scale of millennials, so I definitely remember 9/11. I think just like you, if you were around during 9/11, you remember exactly where you were. You remember exactly where you were standing, what you were doing, who you were talking to. You exactly remember the feelings and the emotions that were conjured up as you watched the Twin Towers fall. I do. I was standing in a doorway of our home in Detroit, Michigan, in the den. My adopted father was already in the den. He was always in the den, yelling and pointing at the news and President Bush at the time. And I remember watching live footage of what was happening, and at the moment only one tower had fallen. I remember watching the reporter, I think it was a female reporter, white female reporters, talking about what was happening. I remember listening to the horror and the shock and the disbelief even in her voice as a professional news anchor. I remember people running around. I remember the chaos. And then I remember live on TV watching the second tower fall. And I know exactly what I was thinking. That it wasn't real. I remember watching it, but it wasn't like registering that it was real. Like, no, this isn't real. This is like a movie, a clip from a movie scene or something. This isn't really happening. It took a long time for it to hit me and register that it was really happening. I remember the emotions and the energy and the atmosphere that was in a home, amongst your friends, in a city, in a neighborhood. I remember our city, like the city of Detroit, even though it was far away from New York, not super far, but far, shut down. Like all the federal buildings shut down. I remember I had theater rehearsal and it was canceled. And then when we did have theater rehearsal again, all the young people coming together in tears, in horror and shock to come together and talk about how they were feeling, like a trauma session. I remember that, and I will never forget that day. To have lived long enough to see the next generation of people literally fangirling over the letter written by a terrorist who was responsible for thousands of lives lost, for reshaping America in a way, reshaping our national security, reshaping the way people view the world, reshaping many people's lives today, because there's many emergency correspondents who are still suffering physically with their health from helping pull people out from the rubble, people who are around who inhaled the dust and the smoke. You know, kids who are grown up today who lost their mothers, who lost their fathers. People are still suffering from PTSD from 9/11 today. It started a war, and I know there's a bunch of conspiracy theories that it wasn't just Osama bin Laden who was the cause of this. However, Osama bin Laden was definitely one of the people who pulled the trigger. And to see people go on TikTok and tears, literally as if he's a rock star, over a letter who was typed up by this man, is utterly shocking to me.
I need everyone to stop what they're doing right now and go read. It's literally 2 pages. Go read A Letter to America. And please come back here and just let me know what you think, because I feel like I'm going through like an existential crisis right now, and a lot of people are. So I just need someone else to be feeling this too.
I need you to stop what you're doing and go read A Letter to America. It is literally the craziest thing I've read in a while. And while I can't say that I'm that surprised, I am pretty shocked. So go read it and tell me what you think, because I really also need to talk to other people about this. And actually, before you even read the letter, I did want to mention, in reading the letter, I could only think of this tweet that I saw the other day. Under settler colonialism, any kind of resistance is branded as terrorist because the only acceptable violence is violence by the occupier.
So this is fucking insane. I just read Osama bin Laden's Letter to America, which I will be going through right here, but it's actually so mind-fucking to me that terrorism has been sold as this idea to the American people, and honestly just so many Western inhabitants within certain nations, that this group of people, this random group of people, just suddenly wakes up one day and just fucking hates you, just wants you dead, wants you gone, and this is all because they believe that they're better than us. Like, that is the root of terrorism. It doesn't make sense. They just hate your fucking nation.
I went and looked for this letter, and at first I just looked for it because I was just curious. I've never heard about this what was A Letter to America, something like that, from bin Laden, and so I was just curious about it, and then I found it. I Googled it, I looked for it, and then I found the letter. And I was about to read it because I was also curious about what could he have possibly written in this letter that have stolen the hearts of many young girls and women. And then I decided not to read it because I don't give a fuck. I don't care what he had to say. You know how, like, when a pedo or a serial killer, you know, they are being arraigned in court, and they get up and they start to say their spiel. Either they apologize for the crimes they committed, they try to convince the family and the judge and the jury that they're really not that bad, even though they destroyed many people's lives. Do you give a fuck about what they have to say? Do you think the families of the children that they hurt, or the parents that have been taken away from family members, the lives that they destroyed, do you think the victims care about their apologies, or care about if they were a beautiful poet or a songwriter? Do you think they actually give a fuck if this person had like deep insights about society or the culture or the world? No. When you commit such a horrific crime against humanity or a person or people, you lose the right to have any empathy, in my opinion. You lose the right for people to care about the words that's coming out of your mouth. You lose the right for people to care about your perspective or your perception or your point of view or your morals or your values. No one cares. You lost that right. I don't care what Osama bin Laden has to say about America. I don't care if he has good points. I don't care if they're deep and radical insights to Americans' politics, culture, and society. Or maybe he's giving us a warning about the downfall of America. I don't know, and I don't care. The fact that other people care is shocking to me. Now, don't get me wrong. From a sort of human psychology, human nature, human study point of view, or if people want to study people to prevent this from happening again or understand the minds of people who would do this, yes, then it's kind of interesting. But to read it just so you can like empathize and almost like woo over mass terrorists that was also a part of a regime that terrorized their own people. Who knows how many people Osama bin Laden has been responsible for destroying, not just Americans. Osama bin Laden isn't some tortured soul who, was terrorized by the West and had to be oppressed and live in poverty and watch his family be wiped out. And that is why he had this passion against the states. He was a privileged ass rich dude who got to go to university in the West. He was basically a progressive. Who just had a disdain for America, just like a lot of American students. Watching so many young people hate the US as they've convinced themselves and been indoctrinated to the idea that the US is one of the most horrible countries in the world because they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about and have no insight of how other people are living in other countries. They are completely entitled and ungrateful for the rights and the privileges that they actually do have. But seeing so many people hate America, it makes me remember that video, that old footage of the KGB spy or secret operative or whatever, and he went to India and changed his mind because, he found his spirituality, or I don't know, eat, pray, love, India. And he sat down and had an interview, and he said one of the ways that they were going to destroy America from the inside out is demoralizing the citizens. And they start with the youth, and they start in education. And basically getting the younger generations to hate and despise their own country, their own ethnicity, and their own culture, where they literally will usher in anything else but that.
Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets used the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism.
I will not be surprised if this guy is next on the list to be fangirled by a bunch of young women. I will not be surprised if you see this guy on TikTok of young people saying he was just a misunderstood artist. He really just wanted to be loved. And you know what? Yeah, he killed a bunch of people, but I might have done the same thing. He just was trying to do the best thing for his country. Like they They already like platform and were teachers of other people who weren't very good guys, who were murderers themselves or genocidal, or who were racist or sexist or homophobic. They have already platformed and heroed people that seemingly goes completely against anything that is of their ideology. So I wouldn't be surprised if this guy wouldn't be the next of hero that they platform and place on their shoulders as just being misunderstood and sad. Why don't we start reading manifestos this way, right? Like when the Columbine shooters, or I don't know, mass shooters or whatever, they leave these manifestos of the reason why they did what they did. Why don't we start doing that? Just read manifestos out loud and play some nice little music in the background and just truly understood when they were coming from. Man, the victims of these families must be really fucking pissed off, because I would. Anywho, guys, that's the end of this video. I don't really have anything else to say. It's just when I saw it happening, I couldn't really believe my eyes and ears. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. They say you live long enough to see yourself as a villain. I guess if we live long enough, we can see the villains become the heroes. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below of this whole thing. Hopefully this is really just a tiny corner of the internet and a very small minute of people who have obviously not been raised right, and this doesn't continue. But I wouldn't be surprised. They will demonize Martin Luther King for being religious and kind of a womanizer, but still a civil rights leader. But they will platform and fangirl Bin Laden. Okay. Anywho, please like, comment, subscribe, and donate. It helps keep me on this platform, guys. And you guys have an amazing day. Bye.
Go read A Letter to America. Like, seriously, go read it. Type A Letter to America in Google or whatever you use, then come right back, because this makes a lot more sense. It explains so much, and I guarantee you it's going to blow your mind. And let's talk about it. So go read it, come back. Whew, it's a lot. It's a lot.